Welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. This is Frank Gaffney, your host and guide for what I think of as an intelligence briefing on the war for the free world. Who better to talk with about that war than a man who has the distinction of being both a major with a background in military intelligence, in fact, an airborne force member in the 82nd Airborne Division, with combat experience in Iraqi freedom. He is also today a member of the United States House of Representatives, Congressman Lee Zeldin, representing with great distinction the people of the 1st District of New York. Congressman, welcome. It's great to have you back, sir.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
You have been thinking about very carefully, it seems to me, and quite commendably, the threat that is being posed to us, not just our friends in Israel and other allies and interests in the part of the world that you fought so valiantly a while back, but here at home as well. And I was struck by a quote from you that was recently picked up in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. It says, quote, "Iran is not negotiating in good faith, and they smell American weakness. Our enemies do not respect weakness. They only respect strength. Today, I challenge our president to bring the Iranian government to their knees. You are the leader of the free world. Act like it," unquote. Bravo, Congressman. Give us a sense of why you think this call to strength and leadership is so imperative.
That is the nature of these leaders of nations like Iran. Quite honestly, they don't respect weakness at all. The president, as a negotiating style, he'll start off talks with making good faith concessions. He'll try to equalize himself with the person that he is speaking with at the other end of the table, even if that person on the other side of the table is one of the greatest enemies of the country that President Obama was elected to be the leader of. And the president...
And sworn to defend, among other things, right?
So, I mean, the president of the United States, whoever that person is, whether it's now or in the past or in the future, bears the burden of when sitting down at that table. There's a much more important role than just making friends personally with the individual on the other side. And so the president sits down with the Iranian regime, or he sits down with the Castro regime. He needs to understand better that the person on the other side of the table, these are individuals that don't want the best for America. They cannot be trusted. They won't be talking in good faith. And in the case of Iran, the president is leaving a whole lot out of the negotiation, from Iran's efforts to overthrow foreign governments or sponsor terrorism or unjustly imprisoning Americans, and the list goes on. So it's a combination of what I believe the president doesn't play for the same team that I do and that most Americans do, combined with the fact that he's a horrible negotiator, and he doesn't understand what the makeup is of the enemy. So when you say there's going to be a consequence for a particular action, there needs to be a consequence. You can't keep having moving lines. You need to have a strong, consistent foreign policy. So it's just a combination of so many factors that leaves him, his administration, but most importantly, our country, very vulnerable at the table with these leaders.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's not just at the table, of course. It translates into real vulnerability. And Congressman Zeldin, you are a member not only of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives, but also the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And you have, as a result, an oversight responsibility for one of the pieces of our vulnerability that I'm particularly seized with, and that is our electric grid. I know there are other committees that have direct jurisdiction, but without that critical infrastructure, none of the rest of our critical infrastructures are going to be of any use. The Iranians have made very clear, as one of your colleagues, Congressman Trent Franks, has pointed out to us, that they consider an electromagnetic pulse attack against the United States to be part of their doctrine. And I just wonder, doesn't this really put into very sharp relief the kinds of concerns that you and others, including some bipartisan colleagues of yours who have joined you in a letter on this subject, are now expressing about the deal President Obama is cutting. And really, especially when you hear the president talking about how we're going to foreclose all of the pathways to the bomb and it's going to be very verifiable and so on, or no deal, as he put it yesterday. Are we not at the point where there really should be no further negotiations, let alone this bad deal?
The president should walk away from the table. I was just raising certain things that weren't part of negotiations. You just brought up another one, Iran's development of ICBMs. The list goes on of stuff that isn't even part of these negotiations. If the president was to strike a deal, and he was presenting the American public with a deal in English, and we're reading it, one very important question is whether or not it's accurately translated, and that the version that the Iranians are interpreting is an accurate translation. And what I don't trust about both sides right now is that I strongly believe and suspect that if they cannot agree to a critical component of a deal, that they will start negotiating how to play with the wording of both agreements in both languages so that each side can go back to their home country, say that they have an agreement, and in fact there actually was no meeting of the minds on these most critical terms. So I don't believe the president...
We actually saw that in practice in the April extravaganza when the president rolled out his fact sheet and the Iranians promptly said, no, actually that isn't what we've agreed to at all. And in the interval, as you know, Congressman Lee Zeldin, we've seen a lot more concessions which seem to bring us closer and closer into alignment with their position. Congressman, may I switch gears with you for a moment? There's so much more to talk about with Iran, but I want to take advantage of your expertise as a military officer and particularly with your specialization in intelligence. Are you troubled by what seems to be another facet of this administration's blindness at best, playing for the other team, I think is the way you put it, that they're not accurately describing the nature of these jihadist enemies? We are endlessly told that we have to worry about countering violent extremism, and we're not only embracing the Iranians, who represent the Shiite wing of this global jihad, but also outfits like the Muslim Brotherhood that represent the sort of leading edge of the Sunni stripe. Before we even get to the Islamic State, doesn't this represent a fundamental failure that really essentially dooms any kind of military or other action we might take in the absence of understanding the enemy we're confronting?
One of the most fundamental, basic lessons, number one, upon confronting a particular challenge is to be able to identify it. You cannot strategize successfully on how to eliminate a particular threat if you can't accurately define exactly what it is. And that's not just about identifying exactly what the enemy looks like, but also exactly what your friends look like, who they are, where they are. And what we're seeing right now, and we were just talking about it in Iran, and now with the threats that we face with radical Islamic extremism, the president, not only will he not accurately identify exactly what radical Islamic extremism is, but when it's time to brainstorm on all of the ways to be able to develop a successful strategy, he'll come up with a multi-pronged approach that features and highlights the need to get more jobs for those in the Middle East who are trying to destroy the free world and eliminate religions off the map in the Middle East. So before even getting into all the failures of the specifics of the strategy, what is most concerning is that he won't even accurately come out of the gate with an accurate analysis of who specifically we are up against.
Yeah, it really does doom any prospect of, as you say, a strategic thought, let alone operationalizing it. Congressman Lee Zeldin, I'd hoped we'd have time to talk with you about the Gaza report, speaking of failures to understand the nature of the enemy, but we will have to do that on another occasion, I hope soon. In the meantime, we are tremendously appreciative of your time today and also the great work you are doing now out of uniform mostly, but also that you have provided to our country in uniform. I hope you'll come back to us again very soon, sir. Thank you for your time today.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
We'll take stock with another combat veteran, Jim Henson of the Center for Security Policy, about many of these issues and more straight ahead.